A dominant showing for Jon Jones in his first title defense at heavyweight, and he ain't done yet. Don't sleep.
This is a business, and it's the business of warfare.
They're selling you all wolf tickets, people. You're eating them right up.
Welcome back. You're locked in with Go Poda. I am Trav, hosting in West Coastin'. I'm riding solo in the 6-4 tonight. As you can see, the boys are on the East Coast, and it is much later for them than it is for me. So I'm not going to complain about how late it is for me, but it is fairly late. So if I'm a little quiet or if my voice sounds a little bit dim, that's because it is 11 o'clock at night, almost 11:30. But I had to jump on because it's going to be fun to talk about this UFC 309 card. The boys were bumping in the group chat. It was a good time chatting with the fellas tonight. Didn't get as much going on socials as we wanted to. I was watching on my phone, so I wasn't able to get much out, and I know the boys were busy as well. But hope you all had fun with the UFC 309 card. This is the official Go Poda recap show for that. I am Trav, of course. Generally, I'll be with Scott, TJ, and Stefan, but of course on the recap shows, being a West Coaster, it's kind of prime time for me to get one in, so we get them in where we can fit them in, you know what I'm saying? So make sure you go follow us on those social media platforms at Go Poda UFC and on YouTube at Go Poda UFC. If this is where you're watching, make sure you hit that subscribe button. This is a pre-recorded episode, so if you give us that subscribe and we get up to 100 subscribers, maybe I can do these live in the future and we can get some questions. Little Q&A happening after the card would be pretty fun as well. So let's talk about UFC 309 here, because as I think about how I'm feeling coming out of the card, did it live up to my expectations? Was there unexpected? Was there surprise? I would say it didn't really surprise me a whole lot, and I think we have to look back a little bit at maybe the build-up to the card, because I think initial thoughts when we first heard about this Jon Jones-Stipe Miocic fight like a year and a half ago, it was booked on November the 16th of 2023 before finally taking place on November the 16th of 2024. So a year later, or it might have been the 11th of 2023, but I digress. Anyway, been a long time, and we did not necessarily want this fight to start with, because we obviously wanted that Tom Aspinall. Maybe we wanted a little bit of Sergey Pavlovich at the time, just one of those young, hungry dogs. Hadn't seen Stipe for a couple years, so it was kind of like Jon Jones was the only one who wanted this fight. But fast forward a little bit, we get a little bit of that Tom Aspinall buzz happening after he beats Sergey Pavlovich, defends his interim title against Curtis Blades, and then of course he's got Jon Jones's name in his mouth in the media, which he absolutely should be as a young, hungry interim champion trying to get that belt. But that kind of built a little bit of the buzz around the card, and then as we led up, the fight week was really fun, actually. Jon Jones had some big comments. Tom Aspinall was an elephant in the room. And then we look at some of Jon's comments towards Stipe as well. So I think the buzz towards this card definitely kind of built. I think the Michael Chandler and Charles Oliveira fight kind of sold itself. Bo Nickal on this card as well has a big name. And of course, the American fans love them some Bo Nickal as that wrestling national champion. Of course, the ladies, Araujo and Silva, were on there. Mauricio Ruffy, fan favorite of the Go Poda UFC show, and we will get to that as well. So I think the card kind of lived up to my expectations, because my expectations kind of were low, but then that fight week kind of built them up a little bit. And I think despite maybe not having that many finishes on the card, maybe late in the card, especially on the main card, you might think it didn't live up to expectations, but I think it was a pretty fun card overall. And based on like pre-fight week expectations, I think it definitely lived up to that. So feeling pretty good coming out of this card. I think there's some big things we can talk about on it, some fun stuff that did happen. Starting in that main event, Jon Jones was a big favorite. I think he was 6-1 coming into this fight. Stipe Miocic coming back as a 5-1 dog for the heavyweight title. Of course, you've seen by now Jon Jones wins via spinning heel kick in the third round. It was a pretty dominant performance by Jon Jones. He came in, he was looking versatile, me and the boys were talking in the chat, and we said that his striking was looking definitely a lot better than we expected. Of course, we didn't see very much of it in that Cyril Gane fight back whenever that was, when Jon won the title. We didn't see very much striking from Jon, so that was really good to see from him here. We knew the wrestling would be there, and we saw that come to fruition in the first round. I think that was a 10-8 from Jon Jones. He striking was okay. It was looking good. They were kind of poking at each other, and then Jon Jones comes in, and then he gets that kind of like a step behind trip. I don't know the technical term for it, but step behind him and then just pushed his body right over. Got him down, kind of kept him there for the rest of the round. Landed some nasty, nasty elbows, as Jon Jones is one to do. I don't know if I saw any 12-6s, but I thought that would have been kind of sick if Jon was throwing some 12-6s in his first fight where they're available. But yeah, I think it was a dominant round from Jon Jones. Lots of control. Stipe got up and, he wasn't looking too discouraged, but definitely it looked like the path was getting slimmer and slimmer for him. Then we get into the second. It was a little bit better for Stipe. He was throwing some combinations and whatnot, but I noticed and mentioned it in the chat that he just looked like the way he was throwing was really slow. He couldn't really get his shots out there. It looked like Stipe combinations, but it looked like Stipe combinations at like 0.75 speed, let's say, and that wasn't enough to get inside Jon Jones's range or do any damage when he was able to connect with any of them. But second round looked a little bit better, but Jon Jones started killing him to the body, and that was a big story because getting into the third, lots more body work coming from Jon Jones, punching him with the jab, which looked probably better than it's ever been. I know that's what Stefan was saying in the chat, and he's been watching the game for a long time. So, yeah, Jon Jones's hands looked really, really good in this one, and kind of made me a little bit more skeptical about a potential cakewalk for Tom Aspinall if they were to fight. But anyway, getting back into the third round, sick combination from Jon Jones where he lands a left. Stipe starts blinking the eye, almost like maybe the thumb caught him in the eye, or just a really good punch where his eye was compromised. And then Stipe is blinking, and then he looks away a little bit, and Jon Jones just cracks him with a right. Stipe's kind of doing a little hop wobble kind of thing, and Jon Jones being patient, stalking his prey. Stalked him until like later in the round. I think, what did he win at? He won at 4:29 of the third. So he stalked him till pretty late in that third round. Then he hit him with that spinning back kick that was one of the nicest ones that you'll ever see, right under the elbow. The slow-mo looked heinous. The entire body just vibrating throughout. I said to the boys that it looked like that kick would have gone right through me, cut me in half. I would never wish that upon my worst enemy, because if you see Stipe in his interview afterwards, he was beat red from like his chest down to his waist, from his belly button all the way over to his side. It looked awful. So breathing is not going to be fun for Stipe for a couple days at least, and that resulted in the win for Jon Jones. And it was a big win for him coming in. It was obviously big to him because he's been campaigning for this fight. Stipe was widely regarded as the heavyweight greatest of all time. So, Jon Jones has that notch in his belt, so to say, and I think he can move on to the next things, because in his post-fight interview, he said to Joe Rogan that he's not going to retire. He even hinted at giving the fans what they want to see, and that's the quote there, is something to do with what they want to see. So whether that be Alex Pereira or Tom Aspinall, I think Jon Jones left the door open there, which is a smart move on his part. You got to keep both of those options open if you're him, because then that leaves your leverage in play as far as negotiating and getting some money. So well played by Jon Jones. Looked like he had a nice celebration in the cage afterwards. He was hanging out for quite a while, chatting about Donald Trump, saying hi to all those guys. Trump had a crazy walkout, one of the best walkouts of the night, I would say, right before the main card. But as always, center stage after a win by anybody. But great win by Jon Jones, and let's just kind of test the waters, or just be a little cautious with the waters before we get too excited about what happens next with Jon Jones, because I would still lean towards it being Alex Pereira versus Tom Aspinall. But I don't know. I think that door is a little bit more open. I think for me, the way Jon Jones looked tonight, why wouldn't you want to go give it a shot against that young, hungry guy, see what you got at 37? To me, beating Tom Aspinall at 30 years old is huge legacy points on your resume. I think if Jon Jones really wants resume, he should go for more title defenses than Stipe, which is 3. So if you put Stipe at number 1, say Pereira's next, Aspinall or Aspinall Pereira, then you need one more after that. So theoretically, if he wants to be full on greatest of all time at light heavyweight and greatest of all time at heavyweight, there's 3 more fights on the docket, but obviously I don't think that's going to happen. I think 1, maybe 2 max is there, and I'm just hoping it's Tom Aspinall, because the Jon Jones that I saw tonight makes me think that fight is a lot more competitive than I might have thought it was going into this card. So still that speed, still that power on Tom Aspinall's side, but we saw what Jon Jones did today against true heavyweight who has some wrestling chops. So I can't wait to potentially see that Tom Aspinall-Jon Jones fight down the road. It'd be interesting to hear what they say in the press conferences. I haven't watched any of that. It's not that far after the fights right now, so I will keep an eye on that. And it's just going to be fun to see leading up, because if we look at the timeline, we probably got months and months of chatter about what's going to happen. And I think that's only better as far as the fight build and, of course, the wallets of the fighters. So good on Jon Jones. Great win. Kind of sad for the Go-Go Potta show. We put our chips down on Stipe this week. That was the official podcast recommendation. Didn't necessarily pan out for us for Stipe. We kind of always knew that was a bit of a long shot, but sometimes you got to go with your heart, and we did that. Of course, TJ is a Cleveland boy from the same area as where Stipe is from. I even saw pictures of a poker game where TJ was playing poker with Stipe Miocic. So pretty cool stuff. Kind of sad on that end, but that is the game that we love so much. So let's talk about that co-main. Michael Chandler, Charles Oliveira. I think this one has to be the fight of the night. We picked it for the fight of the night on the episode this past week. And looking at the other fights on the card, it just kind of has to be, right? There was a bunch of lopsided stuff, a bunch of decisions, and then there was Charles Oliveira, Michael Chandler, which was also a decision, unanimous one, won by Charles Oliveira, but not without events, let's say, as a Michael Chandler or a Charles Oliveira fight is a very eventful fight. Charles Oliveira was just basically dominating for the first 4 rounds. Not a lot of action in the first, but Charles did put Michael Chandler in some submission danger, had a bunch of top control, so that first round was Charles. Second round was dominant Charles. Couple punches, big knee. Chandler kind of had a stumble that sort of kind of looked like a knockdown, but it was definitely a stumble, and he was just kind of running around all over the place. More top control for Charles, and he was smashing some elbows on Michael Chandler. Lots of damage in that third, or that second, sorry, and that round. I don't know what the scorecards say right now. I can look those up in a second here, but I think that second round could have been a 10-8 for Charles, and I think one of the judges did have it as a 10-8 for Charles, because one of them was a 49-45 with Chandler winning the 5th round. So third round was more top control, 3 minutes on the back for Charles Oliveira. Kind of the same deal in the 4th. Couple punches for Chandler, though, earlier in the round, and then Charles decided that he was taking it to the ground, taking the back, and he was going for chokes the whole time. So well done to defend by Chandler, but then we get to the 4th, much crazier round. Chandler was popping Charles. He was throwing those winging, looping shots that he always does. Caught Charles with quite a few, stumbled Charles. Charles took a bit of a desperation shot when his back was towards the cage, so Chandler was coming in, and Charles took a bit of a shot, kind of spun around him. He had some really slick little takedowns. Like, it was kind of hard to even say a couple of them were takedowns. It was more like, get my own back against the fence, get a hook in, and just kind of like deflate him down to the ground is kind of the only way I can describe it. That they were really nice, and it seemed like a really good way for Charles not to have to use a whole bunch of energy to get Michael Chandler on the ground, which he had a lot of control. So if you can get him to the ground and get that control without expending a bunch of energy, that's just an advantage for you. And Charles did that for sure in this fight. But Chandler obviously still fighting, still had some heart, does a typical Chandler thing, and I thought very, very, very WWE. So he stands up with Charles on his back, walks over to the middle of the cage, like pandering to the crowd with a big smile on his face. You can see his gum shield. He's got blood on his face and shit. He looks up and he just jumps and does a back slam right onto Charles. Charles doesn't lose grip on nothing. So Chandler does it again. He gets back up and he's pandering to the crowd, looking up at them and smiling, pauses for a sec, and then dumps him back on his back again. And the reason I say it's very WWE, because if you watch 90s WWE, I'm sure they probably still do it now for the theater of it all, but you'd get a suplex and they'd hold on to that suplex, spin around, stand back up, do another suplex, and the crowd is just popping the whole time. So, yeah, one of the lines in the chat was that I hope Michael Chandler never retires, and amen to that, because it would just be fun to keep watching this guy. He's one of those fighters where losses do not matter. I don't think any stock is lost from Chandler in this. I think he is still in the realm of possibilities of getting that Conor fight. He mentioned Max Holloway for the BMF. I think he absolutely could be in the running to get that fight as well. So good on Michael Chandler for being one of those guys whose stock doesn't really fall, even if he loses. Because no matter what, the guy can lose and he's still getting these top tier fights. So when you lose to Charles Oliveira, that says a lot less than if you're losing to these mid-level lightweights, because you're losing to the best every time you fight. So well done for Chandler, and it has been an incredible run in the UFC so far. And as far as we're concerned, we hope it doesn't end anytime soon. But Charles Oliveira, man, he looked like an absolute fucking destroyer in this fight. He came out, he was popping those front kicks like he does. I think that's one of his sickest weapons. Like, that's, I don't know, it's just such a clean front kick, and he always just hits it really nice, and it gives him a lot of distance and stuff. And of course, they always say use it like a jab, but he uses it really nicely like that. Was beating up the leg of Chandler. The hands looked crispy as always, crisp shots, straight punches, got some power behind him. Definitely could see it on Michael Chandler's face. So good job by Charles. Came and got the decision, had a bunch of chances at finishing, but of course Michael Chandler's tough at nails, so no shame in that. Great fight overall by these two guys, and one-sided, but still probably the fight of the night because of the theater and the show that these guys put on. So I'd watch those guys fight 10 times in a row, but I think Charles probably has title aspirations now after looking at who wins that Arman Saruki and Islam Makhachev fight that I think takes place in January. So watch out for that in the stacked lightweight division. Always good fights going on there. So we always monitor what's happening, even well outside of that top 15. So 155 is a good place to be. And it looks like Charles is kind of the on deck or in the hole to be the number one contender after Arman Saruki. And so, yeah, Michael Chandler's just got options. He's in fun fight territory at this point because there will be no championship ladder climbing for him. Of course, TJ's Hail Mary bet of Michael Chandler by KO, which I think ended at plus 850, didn't hit, but I think he knew that one was a long shot going in, but I think the process over the results on that one, because really good odds on something that we already almost saw happening. Whereas on the Charles side, I think he was minus 245 going in. And while that's fair odds, it is not good enough as far as earning potential for you to want to spend up and be that confident that Charles is going to get that win after seeing him almost get knocked out in the first fight. So I like that bet big time. I think the potential return was great. And if you remember, we were only putting a little sprinkle on that one anyway. So on to the feature bout, Bo Nickal versus Paul Creeg, the Scotsman. He had a big fight against Bo Nickal, but he wasn't able to get it done. Absolute shame, Dana. Okay, yeah, so Bo Nickal got the win over Paul Creeg in what was a boring fight. Really, really boring fight. I think Paul Creeg fights can tend to be kind of boring because he's not really putting much intentional offense out there when he's on the feet. He's always kind of aiming to get it on the ground. Tonight he was kind of throwing those kicks out there, kind of baiting Bo Nickal to try and take him down, but Bo wasn't taking the bait. Bo Nickal, on the other hand, he was coming out there striking. He was pushing forward, pushing some pace, but was having a hard time getting in on that range with the kicks that Paul Creeg was using and kind of the length that Paul Creeg had on him. You can definitely tell that if you were to tell me that one of these guys used to be a 205er, I definitely would have said it was Paul Creeg just by looking at them just from the height. So some length on Paul Creeg's size that made it hard for Bo to get in. But I think He did a pretty good job at kind of persevering. He still has a lot of work to do in the striking. We were talking in the chat as well, and kind of only a few signature strikes that he goes to that can be effective. The rest is all just kind of like showing looks or giving feints and stuff like that. So lots of overhands, and that was really his only avenue. Overhands from the left and the right, to be honest with you. He caught Paul Creeg with a few, but we know Paul Creeg can take a few because he will always take a few to get in there and try and get into grappling situations. So he did take a few. Looked like he had a damaged eye at one point. We thought that there was a little bit of killer instinct lacking on Bo's part because you could see that eye get hurt. It was a big overhand left from Bo Nickal. Again, Paul Creeg was doing kind of the blinking thing like I was talking about with Stipe earlier. But then he backed up to the cage defensively, and Bo was just kind of standing there and didn't really know how to get in there and kind of finish that fight. He was still being extra cautious, almost like he was being careful of a firefight with Paul Creeg, but I don't know if that's something you should be super scared of going in there. Didn't want to get clipped in that firefight and get knocked out, but I don't know. I think at that point you'd felt the punches that Paul Creeg was throwing at you, maybe more importantly, wasn't throwing at you. And at that point, maybe you should be a little bit more aggressive knowing that you got the guy on the ropes. But of course, that's just me. I've never been in the octagon. I've never fought a human being inside a cage. So it's easy for me to say. But I know when I was looking at it there, I was just kind of rooting for Bo to finish. So that's why I say that, is that it's kind of seemed like he had him on the ropes there. So it would have been cool. Would have been cool to see some cool shit. You know what I mean? Cool shit is really cool. But anyway, yeah, good win for Bo Nickal. He's 7-0. We've got to make sure we say that as well. This is his 7th professional fight, and he was fighting Paul Creeg, who has, almost 30 professional fights on his resume. A lot of them high-level UFC fights. So can't hate the player on that one. Bo Nickal did what he was supposed to do, got that win. Paul Creeg, we kind of talked about it on the pod too, because we felt like it was kind of a foregone conclusion that he was going to lose. But Paul Creeg, to me, is just kind of in fun fight territory at this point. You throw him on those UK cards and get the cheap pop early on the card. I don't think he is going for any titles. I think the cut down to 185 is rough on him. I think he does not have the skill set to go back up to 205 with some of those guys throwing soup bones up there. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Paul Creeg. One of the boys was saying that he could potentially get let go, and that's totally fair enough, but I do think he still has that fan base and maybe has that goodwill with the UFC to where maybe they'll give him a couple more shots. Okay, looking at the Araujo and Silva fight, I have to be honest, this was kind of my swing fight where I had a few things to do at the house. I was putting the kids to bed, kind of getting everything ready to watch the final few fights, but I did get a good look at it. It looked like Karine Silva was looking all right at the beginning of the fight, hitting some big shots, had Araujo on the ropes. I think mid-second or so, Silva started to gas a little bit, and Araujo started to make some hay. I think there was some really good wrestling scrambles in there. But then in the third, Silva looked really bad. The optics there were just terrible. She was like, twice she laid on her back just kind of waiting for Araujo to come in, and Araujo wasn't coming in, and Silva was stretching it out as long as she could until that referee was making her get up because she was gassed. And I think Araujo just kind of took over. There was some good grappling, and it looked like Araujo won most of the grappling exchanges from what I saw. I know Karine Silva got some control and kind of some brute force top game there, but I think Araujo kind of took it for the most part over Silva, and then she eventually did take the fight. And I think Karine Silva's got to work on a lot of gas tank stuff because that kind of lost her this one. If she was able to keep going, hit some of those shots, I think she could have potentially taken Araujo out because she had her a little bit on the ropes in that first round. But nonetheless, Araujo got the win. Kind of a speed bump in the rise of one Karine Silva, and Araujo is kind of that proven veteran, bit of a gatekeeper at that division. So it'll be interesting to see what happens on the bounce back for Karine Silva and what next fight is for Viviane Araujo, because I think she earned it. Gutsy performance against the young challenger. And she held her spot, so you can't hate her for that, and you can't punish her for that either, because she did what she was supposed to do, even if it wasn't necessarily the most exciting fight or a knockout or a submission finish, you know? Okay, this fight is the one that I'm probably Well, one of the ones that I was most excited to watch going in, and it wasn't because both of the fighters, it was because one of the fighters, and boy, did that guy ever show out. Mauricio Ruffy. Some call him Ruffy. I call him Hoofy. Rogan and Anik call him Roofy. Don't want to slip him in your drink, apparently, because you might. Anyway, um, this was a fun fight. It was kind of how we said it was going to go. Llontop was a punching bag, but he was a fucking leather punching bag, man. He looked rough by the end of this fight, but he stayed in there. He was throwing. He was game from the jump. From the jump, Hoofy looked faster than him, stronger than him, sharper than him, more active than him. It was really, really a hit piece from Mauricio Ruffy. I swear, like, we are convinced on the Gogo Pata show, and we were talking about it in the group chat, I can't take credit for it, that he is half Irish and has to be related to Conor McGregor in some way. Even when he walked out with the beard, kind of the kids are saying the aura as he was coming out, he just had the mug on and he was really serious as he was coming down to the cage. Looked like Conor, the way he stands, the way he's got his chest out and his head up, you know what I mean? Same as in the cage with that karate stance. So Mauricio Ruffy is quickly becoming a podcast favorite for Gogo Pata. In and out movement is fantastic. The way he rolls with shots and just like turns his head with it, it almost looks like he's dancing or like he's acting or something like that. It's really, really good. I think if you can nitpick anything, it would be that he should have gotten a finish over Hamas Llontop, or Hamas on top, as we coined him on our preview episode. But I think it was a great performance against a really tough guy, right? Hamas on top is a tough dude, so putting him out obviously can't be easy. Hoofy did a really good job and was close to putting him out a couple times, but just didn't get the job done. It was a dominant win anyway, and his rise up the 155-pound division is probably one of my most anticipated to watch over the next couple of years. We talked a lot about that Fighting Nerds team, and he is one of the 155 representatives aside from Jon Silva, and both look very exciting. So guys that are going to be names to watch, and likely ones that are going to be in the mix within the next year or two. So shout out to the Fighting Nerds team. They are doing great work over there. Mauricio Ruffy, I think he's definitely ready for one of those top 15 opponents next. And so let's see who it's going to be. TJ did have a couple of bets on this one. Hoofy inside the decision and under 1.5. Those ones didn't cash, but full disclosure, I put some prop picks down on Underdog Fantasy, and I had Hoofy getting a first round finish as well, and so that one did not cash. So unfortunately not on those ones, but very close. He did have, like I said, Hamas Llontop reeling in the first round with about 30 seconds left to go, but just didn't have enough time to get it done. So credit to Hamas, credit to Hoofy for keeping it safe and not going in there and getting knocked out himself just to try and win me some money. So good fight to start the main card, and I think it kind of set a good tone because we got that one, which was a decision, but an exciting one. Of course, the women's fight wasn't that exciting, but it was a decision, and it ended in a decision. Paul Creeg, Nickal, boring decision. Then Chandler, Oliveira, absolute banger decision, and then of course the TKO in the main event. So I think we got a mix of all sorts of things on this main card, and I think we saw some real positives from some fighters that we wanted to see. So let's take a look at these prelim cards. First, I want to say thanks for listening. I appreciate it. If you are checking out the show, checking out the channel, checking out the socials, check us out at GoGoPata UFC on social media, Instagram and x.com. We are actually on that new Blue Sky social. Saw that a bunch of people were getting in there and wanted to go check it out and see what the MMA landscape is, and there's not a ton of MMA people on there from what I've seen so far. So if you're on Blue Sky, gogopataufc.bsky.social, I think is what it is. So check it out. Who knows if it sticks around for a while, but we kind of wanted to see if we could get in there and get some eyes on the show. So if you're over there, give us a follow as well. So Bread and Butter is that YouTube channel. You're probably watching this on there right now. Make sure you hit subscribe. If you disagree with anything I said, if you think I'm a fucking idiot, throw a comment in there. If you think I know what I'm talking about and I am the all-knowing for MMA, I think you're wrong, but you can also comment that in there as well. So We love seeing comments from the people. It just lets us know that we got a little bit of a community building around the show, which is what we want to do. So, okay, those prelims. I think this is like the people's favorite for the show was the Jonathan Martinez and Marcus McGee fight. Jonathan Martinez went in as a bit of a dog to Marcus McGee, which was a little bit surprising in the first place, but I think we kind of saw why in this fight for the first little while. It was a 29-28 unanimous decision for Marcus McGee. Really interesting fight to watch because McGee came out hot. He came out fast, as he kind of always does. He's always kind of active early. Really fast hands, this dude. Really good footwork. Really good in and out movement for Marcus McGee. Martinez, on the other hand, he started kind of slow. He was super inactive for the first little while. Took him quite a while to get any kind of rhythm, any kind of timing, until the mid-second. Took a little bit of momentum to finish that second round. Those leg kicks were kind of predominant. He was hitting a couple of leg kicks on McGee, working the hands a little bit more towards the middle of the second. And he like I said, he got a little bit of momentum as we moved into the third. And then the third round was all Jonathan Martinez. Killed the leg of Marcus McGee. There was one kick where you knew it was just like a couple more and that one's done. This guy can barely even walk. But Martinez was not able to finish him in the time that he had. It was terrible fight IQ. This was a big talking point in the chat. I know TJ was kind of going off on that fight IQ because Martinez could have had this fight won. That leg was so compromised that he could have finished him with it. Remember, Jonathan Martinez has his last two finishes were via leg kick stoppages because he just beat the shit out of somebody's leg. So he has done that before, and he just decided to take his foot off the gas. He went into a clinch with McGee, was in the clinch for like a minute something, wasted away a shitload of the round, and then he just didn't have that momentum of a dead leg from McGee. McGee already kind of figured out what it was going to be like when he stood on that leg, and then he had already kind of compensated for it, and he was doing a good job. He was still throwing back. He was still looking dangerous. Martinez still had to be wary of those shots that were coming back from McGee because they were power shots, and he was still throwing them. So good on him. But anyway, it was a really good scrap, and Marcus McGee did enough in those first two rounds to kind of stockpile the points to where that third round didn't necessarily matter. Clear third round for Martinez. Martinez had him on the ropes, almost won. I mean, damn close to a 10-8, which could have resulted in a draw, which would have been awful. But I think the right guy won in this fight. I think Martinez just started way too slow and looked kind of way too lethargic early in the fight to be able to get any good grace with those judges. But he fought hard in the third round, and I think he saved face a little bit after how the fight started, to the point where he's not going to lose a ton of stock, and we could still see him in a bunch of big fights in the bantamweight division. Apologies for rambling or missing any words here. It is getting close to midnight here. Gonna have to wrap up in a little bit, but we'll fly through these other fights pretty quick. Decent night of fights. We had some finishes earlier on the card. So before the McGee and Martinez fight, we had Jim Miller. Jim Miller wins by first round guillotine. That was pretty fun. Jim Miller, putting it on, and he wasn't silly. He jumped the ghillie, and it paid off for him in this one. So big win for Jim fucking Miller. Second on the all-time wins list, second on the all-time submissions list, and first on the all-time UFC fights list. So great career continues for Jim fucking... Actually, no, it doesn't, because he laid the gloves down. I actually wasn't listening to a bunch of the commentary, and I didn't see too much of the post-fight interviews, especially on the prelims, but I do remember seeing those gloves shortly after, and Jim Miller retired. So shout out to him on an incredible career. He's one of those kind of journeyman dudes who wasn't supposed to be necessarily a champion, and he wasn't, but he turned that into a successful and long UFC career, one that is Hall of Fame worthy in my book. And guys that I don't want to say fought at the level that he did, because that sounds I don't know, that just sounds like I'm diminishing the level that he fought at, but he didn't necessarily get to that top tier, that fighting those top three guys, fighting, year in and year out as the guy that's kind of putting these young guys back and keeping his spot. But he was one of those guys that always put on good fights, and he's done it for a long time. And so I think he defied some of the odds and he stuck around and put on a great show, and he went out with that first round win. So that's a great way to go out for old Jimmy Miller. David Onama beat Roberto Romero. He threw 121 strikes in that fight, and didn't catch a ton of this one, but it looked like Onama was beating him up pretty good. I think, kind of a linear move for David Onama from the fact that he probably should have finished this Romero guy, who was called up on like 3 days notice to fight David Onama at UFC 309, which is a massive spot. So shout out to Romero for making the fight. Shout out to Onama for, accepting the fight as well. But I think there was a little bit of meat maybe left on the bone, not putting the guy away, but Romero proved very tough, and Onama proved that he has got a lot of skill. So excited to see his next fight nonetheless. Tybura beat Jonata Deniz. Good thing. That would have sucked for Tybura to lose that number 8 heavyweight spot to a newcomer in the UFC. Remember, Deniz was supposed to fight Derek Lewis at the UFC Edmonton card a few weeks ago, but Derek Lewis fell out on the day of, so Deniz was moved in pretty short order to a new fight against Marcin Tybura on this one, and it was a doctor's stoppage after the second round. I don't recall exactly seeing the shot. I was in and out on the prelims, but Tybura got it done, got the win by doctor stoppage, and kind of keeps that 8th overall or 8th heavyweight spot. I don't think it moves him up any. I don't think it raises his stock a bunch. It was more just kind of a stand pat and wait for the next guy that's going to maybe let you kind of elevate your position off of a win. Fun one here, Ramiz Brahimaj against Mickey Gall. Mickey Gall looked decent early, but Brahimaj kind of just took over and then tuned him with the right hand and put him out. And I guess Ramiz Brahimaj is a Brooklyn guy, I think they said, so kind of sweet for him to win in the home state. Really nice punches, and the fellas were saying that Mickey Gall just is not a UFC level fighter anymore. He was one of those top prospects, and of course the main thing I remember him from is he was the opponent against CM Punk, and then he's kind of made a bit of a surge trying to rekindle his career after some injuries, but it looks like that candle has been all but blown out. So it remains to be seen whether he will continue in the UFC, Mickey Gall, but best of luck to him regardless, and a big win for Ramiz Brahimaj, who continues to kind of move up at welterweight and see where he can go. Another one of my most anticipated fights, Oban Elliott versus Basel Hafez. Basel Hafez was a big underdog, but I thought that was a little bit on the disrespectful side because he did give Jack Della Maddalena all he could handle on a short notice fight that Hafez accepted. But yeah, he came out. It looked very competitive early. Oban Elliott, of course, sharp striker, always looks very good, and he did so tonight. He landed 65 strikes is what I'm seeing here unofficially. And he landed that knockdown on Hafez in the third round. 40 seconds into the third round, right hand, right to the mouth, right on his ass, and then some ground and pound just to finish it off. So big win for Oban Elliott. I think he's ready for a bit of a jump up at welterweight potentially, but maybe not too fast because he's got star quality, man. So let's make sure we kind of curate that career and make sure he gets what he needs to be able to blossom, let's say. Curtain jerker Eduarda Maura versus Veronica Hardy. Maura got the W, unanimous decision. Pretty ho-hum fight. Nothing really to write home about. Maura got that decision. I would say that Hardy still looked kind of exactly like we said, very technical and pretty good fight IQ in there, but Maura just was able to get it done and was able to cause a little bit more damage there. So Veronica Hardy continues, and Maura moves up a little bit after that performance. So good on her. Looking at the fight stats here, yeah, Maura got 3 takedowns. Veronica Hardy got 46 significant strikes and 0 takedowns. So a little bit of the story of the fight was a little bit of control from Eduarda Maura, and she looked like she was a weight class bigger than Veronica Hardy as well. So it's pretty tough when you got somebody who's that much bigger than you laying on you. You can't really get up. So that was a bit of a speed round through the UFC 309 card as a recap. I hope you enjoyed it, everybody. It was a fun card. It's been really fun getting in the mix with the boys. Of course, this is like my 4th episode in. I've done 2 of the main episodes, and this is the 2nd recap, and it's been really fun. These guys know their shit. It's been a lot of fun chatting shop with them, getting in the mix, and really appreciate them for welcoming me into the show. So also appreciate you, the listeners, for welcoming me into the show. We've had some pretty good reception on the socials and on the YouTube channel. Really hope you go follow us there. That's where we're going to make our hay. So the more follows there, the more content we can bring to you, the more we have an idea of what you want. So please let us know with a comment and a like what you like, and we'll try to make it better for you. But I'm going to head out. It's just about time to hit the old dusty and go to sleep. But thank you for listening. We will see you come UFC 3010. Some shuffling on that card, so you'll see some information about that on the social media platforms, so follow us there. I am Trav. Hope you had a great night at 309. Until next time, peace.
This is a business, and it's the business of warfare.
They're selling y'all wolf tickets, people. You're eating them right up.
Shit.
I'm not surprised, motherfuckers.
Little game plan and she go in there, then with some good shit, don't get hit, and come home with a pocket full of cash.